been talking about this in my last post. A lot of my textiles and steam engines and the alcohol steam engines or the water wheel stuff, a lot of my stuff was made of hardwood, oak wood, mahogany, ironwood, um, wood that came from trees that was 500 to 1,000 years old. Some of the big the big wheels were over 30 feet tall and made of wood that came from trees that was over 1,000 years old. So, and like just imagine a 1,000-year-old mahogany tree that was cut down to make a wheel for a textile or some other one of my textiles or mills. All the wood was all hardwood, and so it needed a constant environment. Textiles in the old days, moisture could warp them because they're so big. They would warp, they would twist, they would, if you didn't have a constant temperature around them, constant temperature was key. So the rooms had to be big, massive, constant temperature rooms. So big buildings. So a lot of these old buildings, when you look at like what's it called, hall or some great big castle, what you're actually seeing is like a textile that had a steam engine inside one part. Usually there'd be like a building off to the side that's a little more square than all the others, and that would house the steam engine. And usually it would have like windows up higher or something, and that's where all the ports would go for the steam or whatever to let it out into the air. Um, the old days, I built buildings a certain way. The roofs would change, of course, and stuff like that. But the stone walls, stone lasts forever. So anyway, though, but the buildings had to be kept at a constant temperature. So in order to do that, they were made out of stone. And so you would have like doorways were like great big beltways usually. Like if you look at that room right there, a belt might have gone through that door down to the stairway where there would have been something else. And then this would have been like a beltway or something else like that. I don't know exactly what was there exactly off the top of my head. But these big textiles, and like I said, you would have a textile that's like 30 feet across, which meant it had to come from an old mahogany or tree or oak wood tree or ironwood tree that was literally 1,000 years old, that was 30 feet long. So, and they had to carve those things. Now, that's fine, and I didn't mind spending the cost because, they were going to last 150, 250 years, which they did. They lasted, I heard, something like 400 years. Some of them really didn't really wear out, because they were preserved so well and kept so well. And they use oil preservatives and stuff like that. But these machines were like literally the size of rooms. And great big huge textiles. A lot of the old rugs that you see, the tapestries, those came off of those giant like 30-foot, 40-foot wide mahogany benches. Anyway, I don't know if I forget what they were, if they were mahogany but they were a type of hardwood, I know that. And my trees were the oldest of 500 to 1,000 years. I think I paid for the really old trees because they were on other people's land. So I was like, yeah, I'll buy them. What the hell? I don't care. I only need a couple, and I'll definitely more than make it back. So anyway, though, whatever. And I planted new ones, so eventually I could resell them some later point. Anyway, though, so a lot of these rooms, when you look at these old castles, they weren't really necessarily originally built to impress. They were originally built to be functional. And candle shops, carriages, steam engine running a mill that would turn out carriage wheels or carriages. I did a lot of building and stuff, and that's what a lot of these old stone buildings, they actually built the rest of the country. I built these big stone buildings first. Well, originally I had wooden construction things, and then I moved, and then as I gained in money and financial wealth, I started building these big stone buildings, mostly because the textiles, if they were going to be 30 feet across, they needed to be kept inside of a temperature-controlled room. They couldn't be on dirt floor because dirt, moisture comes up through the dirt, and then it twists the frame. So they had to be on stable, hard ground stones or a good stable floor. I learned that the hard way. You can't just put those things on dirt. They twist. Anyway, so we built these buildings to keep them straight and in line so, they could run all day. And so that's why these great big rooms are like this, because they were, they housed the big textiles. and they also made shoes and stuff in there. They housed the big beltways for the big belts to go around, so they could power all the sewing machines, so they could be making shoes all day. And thousands of people would work inside these big stone buildings, and they would be living in brick or shale buildings themselves. But lots of people would come to these places and build and make shoes or clothes or silk or whatever. The different buildings varied, or the uses of the buildings varied, but pretty much that's what these buildings were actually for, and why they're so big. And in the long run, it always worked out, because it's like, yeah, it's going to cost me like $1,000 or 1,000 whatever quid or whatever. But it's like, but then this building lasts for 500 years, and and then later on, when after the textiles were no longer needed, they they took out the textiles, and then I was kind of doing this whole ballroom dancing kind of high society kind of thing. So I had a lot of buildings to choose from, and I was like, well, choose some of the biggest and let's make them nice. So they chose some of the big ones, and I had other factories, churning out, since we had metal then, and the big frames didn't have to be made out of hardwood, so they're easier to build. So so they could be, in lesser buildings, cheaper construction buildings, and so these old buildings became like the nice high society ballrooms and stuff, and then I was able to do like cool stuff that way. And I did like a little project on high society and balls and dances and smoking rooms and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so, it wasn't, I didn't just go like, oh, I'm going to build this huge, I think I did purpose build one or two castles. There were one or two castles where I was like, okay, we're going to build this. We're just going to build this as a big castle, where I was like, okay, huge ballroom, huge warehouse. But a lot of them actually, like this one in particular, that I believe was a beltway. And I've seen pictures. There's pictures of all these places. And you can even probably go back and see on the building plans, it was like beltway and textile, because they usually drew it out, because the building was literally built around the idea of the textile. So, or the function. It had function first, and then the building was built. And I was usually like, oh, God. I was like, oh, that's going to be a lot of stone. Oh, well. Just going to have to do it. Let's go find a quarry. So we found a quarry, and, elephants or horses or oxen. And so slowly but surely these buildings were built, and they lasted 500 years or more. Or a long, 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 long time, until the textiles were literally outdated. So, and we could do it a better way somewhere else. So but that's how, I became, and how I ended up with so many big, huge houses. And then later on I was just like, well, they've lived there their whole lives. Who am I? These families have grown up there. They had like 13 kids. The kids literally were like living inside the houses for like generations. And it's like, I could always build another one. So I was like, well, I don't really want to kick them out. It's just rude. So I just let them live there. And it's just like, whatever. And I built other big houses. I was like, okay, let's build some bigger houses for me. So, because I had a full-time construction team at the time. So I was like, I can build a Trump Towers or whatever. Twin Towers, like the World Trade Center. And like, I didn't build like Trump Tower or whatever. That was whoever dude. That one's him. Not me. But like the Empire State Building, that one was mine. And I think there might have even been a penthouse up there for me. I usually was like, okay, and this level is going to be mine. I always did that. And this little spot's going to be mine. And this house is going to be mine. I always built my own house. But, I eventually later on just let the people who were going to be running the factories live there. So I was like, whatever. All right, I got to go build this other stuff anyway. So I got to do a nuclear power plant over here. So shit. So you guys go ahead and just live there. So anyway, and that's what I did. So anyway, and that's how it all happened.